What is up guys, I'm Uriza. This story is all about what if Naruto became a villain. Naruto becomes the villain everyone in the village always thought he would be. Only one person will risk everything to try and redeem him. His best and most loyal friend, Uchiha Sasuke. Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 34, Goodbye. The Umbu who guarded the Tower of Sound stepped aside and bowed to him. He and Kabuto were the only ones permitted to enter Orochimaru's presence without being summoned. Naruto opened the doors to the Otokage's private office. He entered to find him sitting there scribbling his signature and stamping his personal seal onto a stack of papers. I wonder what all our enemies would think if they only knew the mighty Snake Sunin spent most of his time sitting behind a desk working like some grunt clerk or accountant. Naruto sat down without bothering to wait for an invitation. Orochimaru looked up at him with an amused expression. I can remember Sarutobi-sensei always complaining that paperwork was the bane of every Kage's existence. I admit that back then I thought he was exaggerating and that a leader could do whatever he liked. But controlling Oto includes keeping an eye on the various needs of the village. It's boring but necessary. When I run things I'll make 100 clones and have them take care of all that in half an hour. Orochimaru raised a single eyebrow. You mean of course when you are Hokage and running Konoha one day? Of course, Naruto said with a grin. How else would I mean it? Orochimaru gave a wary nod. Just as I have promised you will be Hokage one day Naruto, I will give you Konoha as a reward for all your hard work and loyalty. That's very generous of you Orochimaru-sama. Naruto said. Today is the day isn't it? The day you take Sasuke's body. Yes, Orochimaru said eagerly. At long last I will have the power of the Uchiha, I have waited for this day. You did very well Naruto, Kabuto tells me Sasuke is in perfect health, without even a bone broken. Once I possess his body I will be truly invincible. Since you're so pleased, do you think I could ask for one slight favor? In the underground cells of the tower Kabuto was just leaving as Naruto arrived. Lord Naruto, Kabuto said in his usual cheerful manner. What are you doing here? I came to have a last word with one of my few old friends, Naruto said. Really? Does Lord Orochimaru know? Naturally, you don't think I'd try talking to such an important prisoner without the Otokage's permission, do you? Truthfully Naruto-sama, I don't know what you might be capable of. Only the tiniest hint of suspicion tainted the words. Do you object to my having the chance to say goodbye to my friend? Naruto asked. Not if Lord Orochimaru does not, Kabuto said. Naruto walked past him before Kabuto spoke again. Is that really all you are going to do? Naruto halted and looked back over his shoulder at the young medic nin and spy. What else could I do? He then continued down the gloomy hallway to the appropriate cell. Sasuke was bound hand and foot in heavy iron chains. The walls of the cell had been especially sealed against earth or teleportation jutsus and would have been almost impossible to escape even if he could have worked them. Each hand was held firmly to the stone wall, it was impossible to bring them together to form hand signs. Kabuto had just given him a last medical examination and had told him that Orochimaru would be coming to see him soon. When the steel door to his cell clanked and slowly swung open, he expected to see the Snake Sunin standing there. Instead he saw his old friend. The one who had betrayed him and brought him here. Naruto shut the cell door and performed a quick jutsu to confirm they were unobserved before speaking. Hi Sasuke, he said in a normal tone as though they were meeting on the street. Hello Naruto, Sasuke also did his best to sound calm. I don't know if you'll believe this, but I really am very sorry that you're here now. I never wanted this for you. That's strange to hear since you're the one who brought me here. Sasuke said. I suppose I deserved it though for believing you meant it when you said we would always be friends. I didn't mean it Sasuke, then and now. I still think of you as a friend. If that's true then why did you betray me? It was necessary to achieve my goals, Naruto said. Orochimaru wanted your body and ordered me to collect you. And since I need Orochimaru. He spread out his hands in a helpless gesture. So you betrayed me because you were ordered to. Is that strange for a ninja? Naruto answered back. You were umbu for a while, what sorts of things did you do under orders? And at least I had a reason. Why did Sakura betray you? Sasuke's eyes lowered a bit. I'd like to think she was trying to help me, he said. I don't think she really thought of it as betrayal. So if I tell you I didn't think what I was doing was a betrayal either, would that make it okay? Did you come here to ask forgiveness? Sasuke asked him. Is that why you're here? No, Sasuke, I don't need forgiveness for what I've done. Not from you or anyone else. But don't you regret it? Sasuke asked him. Betraying the village and the Hokage, don't you ever wish you could go back and fix things? No, Naruto said flatly. Go back? Go back to what? To being hated? To being leashed? To having people treat me like a monster for something that wasn't even my fault. He shook his head. No thank you, I much prefer it here where people respect me and where I can be someone. Like I told you before, Sasuke, it's much too late for me to go back to what I was. But you're in darkness, Naruto, Sasuke said, pleading. He knew he was doomed, but as long as there was any chance at all of saving his friend, he wanted to try. Can't you see that? Naruto simply grinned. Sure I am, where else would a monster like me be? I'll let the darkness be my light. Sasuke looked at him sadly. I'm sorry I couldn't save you. It was never your job to save me, Sasuke. Naruto said. But I thank you for caring enough to at least try. Sasuke wearily nodded. It had all been for nothing after all. So is that it? Is that what you came here to say? No, Naruto said. He looked about the cell carefully and moved closer to Sasuke. Despite his earlier jutsu, he was still wary. He put his lips to Sasuke's ear and spoke in a low whisper. You're going to die in a little bit, Sasuke, I'm sorry but I can't save you. But what I can do is give you the chance to make your death mean something. What are you talking about? Taking his cue from Naruto, Sasuke also lowered his voice. I have a special slow-acting poison with me, Naruto said. It has no known cure and is almost impossible to detect even using medical jutsus. If you were to drink it, then when your body dies it'll kill Orochimaru. Sasuke gave him a sharp look. You want to use me to assassinate Orochimaru and become Hokage? That's right. Sasuke looked directly into his friend's face. You really have become a complete bastard, haven't you? You not only betray someone who was a friend to you, but you want to use me to become a Kage. I am what Konoha made me, Naruto said. What circumstances made me? No, Sasuke said. You chose this path on your own. No matter how hard things might have been, everything you've done was a choice. I wouldn't expect you to understand, Teme. A little bitterness crept into his voice. Even though you lost your family, you still had everything I always wanted. People loved and respected you, girls chased after you, everyone was always fawning over your bloodline and your talent. How could you know what it was like for me? I know you had it hard, Naruto, I know that. But you weren't alone, you had the old man looking out for you, you had me and Sakura and Kakashi, and you even had a girlfriend. You were making friends, you were making a place for yourself. Yeah, and then Sarutobi betrayed me. He did not try to keep the bitterness from his voice now. I won the Chunin exams and showed him and everyone my power. I showed him the power I would have used to serve him. And what did he do? What was my reward? He refused to promote me and was going to have Jiraiya seal away my chakra. Naruto, you used the Kyuubi's power in front of the whole village. You deliberately killed both Neji and Gaara. How could the Hokage reward you for that? What did they teach us in the academy? That we had to be ready to kill and to die. That we had to become as powerful as we possibly could. What did I do wrong? Sasuke could see Naruto really meant it. Even after all this time, he could not see anything wrong with his actions that day. Enough of this, Naruto said. It doesn't matter how we got here. What matters is I am giving you this one chance to make your death mean something. Will you take it? Or do you just want to let Orochimaru have your body? Sasuke weighed the choice for a moment. I'll do it, but only if you'll promise to do one thing for me. You want me to kill Itachi for you? Naruto asked. No, Sasuke said, taking Naruto by surprise. Promise me that if I do this for you you'll spare Konoha. Spare Konoha? Hell no, I'll burn the damn place to the ground. Ask for something else. If you won't make that promise I won't do it. Naruto glared at him. Sasuke looked right back, he had nothing left to fear. I won't spare them, Naruto said. But I'll do this much, when the time comes I'll give them one chance to surrender to me. I'll let anyone who surrenders and pledges fealty to me live. That's as far as I'll go. That's not good enough, Sasuke said. Naruto's sharp hearing heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. He's coming. Naruto hissed and produced the vial in his hand. There's no time. Take what you can get, Sasuke. He eyed the vial. Promise then, swear it, you'll spare anyone from Konoha who surrenders to you and swears to serve you. I swear it, Naruto said hastily. It's a promise of a lifetime. Then give me the poison. Naruto swiftly unstoppered the vial and put it to Sasuke's lips. He swallowed it down in a single gulp. Naruto made the vial disappear just as the cell door opened and Orochimaru entered with Kabuto right behind him. Sorry to interrupt, Orochimaru said jovially. But the time has finally arrived. That's all right, Naruto said calmly. I've said what I needed to. He gave his friend a last look. Goodbye, Sasuke. Goodbye, Naruto. Naruto then silently exited the cell. When he was gone, Orochimaru ordered Kabuto to perform a last physical examination. The medic nin used his diagnostic jutsus to check every aspect of Sasuke's body. He pronounced him perfectly healthy. Well satisfied, Orochimaru approached him, his hands were trembling in anticipation. Do not despair, Sasuke, some part of you will live on in me. As a last mercy I will grant you any wish you may desire. Sasuke eyed him with calm. In that case I wish you to die a very painful death in a very short time. Orochimaru laughed. That I am afraid I can't grant you. Before his eyes Sasuke saw the image of a massive snake. Despite the pain of the transfer he refused to cry out. Though he died with many regrets, he died as well as he could, and with the hope that his death would at least accomplish some good. It began just a few hours later. Orochimaru noticed he was feeling hot and his legs and arms were sore. A couple hours later he had a fever and his body was racked with aches and pains. He was forced to his bed as Kabuto examined him and tried to figure out what had happened. The news that the Otokage was ill spread quickly and people were fearful. As night approached, Orochimaru was coughing up blood and sores covered his entire body. It was obvious to anyone who looked at him that the Otokage was dying. It was then that Naruto arrived at the Otokage's palace with the members of the Sound Seven with him. His first action was to dismiss the Umbu guards and inform them that he and his squad would protect the failing Orochimaru. The guards hesitated, but finally obeyed. What is the meaning of this? Kabuto demanded as he was dragged out of the palace with Zabuza holding both arms behind his back. Naruto smiled at him. You're being let go. I already have a medic nin to take your spot, and to be honest I don't think I could ever trust you. Kabuto looked at him hatefully. You poisoned Lord Orochimaru, didn't you? Yeah, I did, Naruto said. Goodbye, Kabuto. At a nod, Zabuza reached up with one hand and snapped Kabuto's neck with ease. Orochimaru looked up from his sick bed when he heard the door open. Kabuto, where have you been? Do something to cure me. Oh, I don't think he'll be able to do anything for you, Otokage-sama, Naruto said as he strolled in. He took one look at the mess that was the Great Snake Sunin and grinned. Does it hurt? Can I get you some aspirin? I want your final hours to be as pain-free as possible. Orochimaru found the strength to summon a sliver of chakra and make a hand signal activating the death seal. Die. Naruto's eyes widened and he suddenly clenched his chest. He stumbled forward as though about to fall. Then he stopped and dropped both hands to his sides. Just kidding, he said. Orochimaru stared at him hatefully. You found the seal on your heart and countered it. Of course, I am a seal master after all. He came over to Orochimaru's bedside and smiled down at the helpless ninja. I want to thank you for all you've done for me, and thank you for working so hard to create the village of Oto. I promise you that as your successor I'll make it the most powerful village in the world. I curse you, Orochimaru said. May you be damned. That only made him laugh. If I'm not already damned, I'd be amazed. Goodbye Otokage, Sama. He walked out of Orochimaru's bedroom whistling a happy tune. I love it when a plan comes together. Chapter 35, Everything on Track. 3 days after Orochimaru's death, Oto held a spectacular memorial and funeral service. The streets were lined with flowers and a huge feast was prepared for the entire village. The service was attended not only by the entire village, shinobi, and civilian, but by representatives of all the other ninja villages, great and small, with the exceptions of Konoha and Suna, of course. Even before the ceremony, wild rumors had flown throughout the village that their beloved Otokage and his personal medic Nin Kabuto had been murdered by leaf assassins. The authorities in Oto neither confirmed nor denied these rumors. The fact that members of the Sound Seven were overheard talking about leaf assassins did tend to give these rumors additional credence. As the procession snaked its way from the tower to the memorial ground, it was led by the second Otokage. Lord Uzumaki Naruto wore black mourning clothes like everyone else. His face held the same solemn sadness that many of the spectators felt in their own hearts. The sadness from the mourners was not feigned. To the people who lived in Oto, Orochimaru had been a great and benevolent leader. He had founded their new village and many of them had come here and prospered thanks to his brilliant leadership. Whatever his enemies and victims might think, many of the people who had come to say goodbye to him had truly loved him. At the memorial ground, the oak casket was laid down with care. On its side was the inscription, Orochimaru, first Otokage and founder of the ninja village hidden within the sound. Lord Uzumaki was giving his beloved sensei every possible honor and the best possible farewell. As the ceremony commenced, he stood before the vast crowd and spoke a few words in honor of his mentor and sensei. Today we say goodbye to a great man and leader. A man of rare genius and vision who created all that we see here today. Though he is gone, I am certain his vision will live on in every single one of us. Let us strive and work hard to make Oto the great village Orochimaru-sama always dreamed of. To commemorate and honor his memory, I have ordered 7 days of feasting and public games. I have also ordered a statue in his image to be built that shall stand 20 feet tall. His memory shall live on. With that he stepped forward and placed a white chrysanthemum before the coffin. His wife followed next with the various dignitaries doing likewise. After which the shinobi and common citizens came forward one by one to show their respects. May I say, Otokage-sama, that was very moving, the dignitary from Iwa said. She was a young kunoichi with shirt back hair, a black shirt beneath armor, black shorts, and fishnet stockings. I thank you, Kurachuchi-san, Naruto replied. Of course I know it's easy to speak well of your sensei, she said. Especially when they're gone and you know you'll never see them again. Naruto gave her a sideways glance. Was she hinting at something? A subtle message that the Chuchikage knew the sort of man he was? He was my sensei and my Kage and taught me a lot of the things. I know how much I owe to him. Kurachuchi nodded. Such as your position as Otokage. Very true, Naruto replied. He made me Vice Kage and his successor because he had faith in me. I can only hope to be as great a man as he was. She smiled. Not many men could hope to match a Sunin, but I suspect you just might. You praise me, he said. It's what I honestly believed and what the Chuchikage believes as well. She looked over at him carefully. He hopes the close ties between our two villages will continue. Please tell the Chuchikage that I want that too. Inform him the treaty he and the Orochimaru signed will be honored by me. If he likes, I will add my signature to it as well. She quickly nodded. If you do not object, the Chuchikage would appreciate that. She carefully looked about to confirm no one else was standing too close. As an added precaution, she still dropped her voice. And what of Konoha? You may inform the Chuchikage that Konoha's fate remains unchanged. She gave another slight nod and carefully stepped away, well satisfied. Naruto stood there looking on as the endless line of mourners slid up to and past the coffin. When the last mourner had paid his respects, he and the funeral party would continue on to the field where the coffin would be buried. Of course, Orochimaru's body wasn't actually in there. He was going to allow Kabuto to perform one last useful task by taking his master's place in the cemetery. Naruto had plans for the body. It's good to see you again, Karen, Naruto said. It was a couple days after the funeral and Naruto was no longer dressed in mourning clothes. He now wore some custom-made robes that had been based on Orochimaru's design. The only difference was that the robes were now in white and orange as opposed to white and gold. He had summoned his head researcher to his private office where he and Hinata were meeting with her. So far everything had gone smoothly. Except for Orochimaru and Kabuto, his little coup had come off seamlessly. No one else had died. He had proclaimed himself Otokage as soon as Orochimaru expired and ordered that all shinobi swear loyalty to him. The Otonin had done so without a word of complaint. There hadn't even been any defections. They saw him as Orochimaru's legitimate successor, and given his own reputation no one had any delusions that they would challenge him for the post. The business leaders and guild leaders had been just as eager to kneel to him as soon as he told them the tax rates and regulations would all remain in place. The village's economy was running smoothly. The last thing he intended to do was interfere with that. Karen and her staff were among the last he had called in to swear. She and the researchers she led were a bit nervous. She understood that some of the things they did might be objectionable to some. She didn't believe Naruto would be like that, especially as he had worn a curse seal. With Orochimaru's death, however, all the curse seals had been rendered inert. What would happen next with her research depended on what Naruto had to say to her now. Karen fell to her knees without even waiting to be asked to. She cast her eyes toward the floor and spoke. I swear my eternal and unwavering loyalty to you, Lord Uzumaki Naruto. I am but your humble and obedient servant. Command me and I shall obey. She looked up when she heard a snort of laughter from him. You humble Karen-chan. I doubt it, but thank you for swearing. It puts my mind at ease. Seeing him in a good mood set her at ease too. How can I serve you, Otokage-sama? She got back up to her feet. He casually motioned to his wife who was standing by his desk. She was not smiling, she had on that cool Hyuga mask of indifference. The way she stood ramrod straight did come off as a bit hostile. I want you to start working closely with Hinata-chan. She is a brilliant medic nin and will help you in certain areas of your research. What areas did you have in mind, Otokage-sama? She liked doing things her own way but knew just how important it was to keep the person in charge happy. Especially when the person in charge could have you dissected if he wasn't happy with you. Orochimaru had worked very hard to keep a sterling public reputation once he became Otokage. But where people couldn't see, he was an absolute monster. It never even occurred to her that her own test subjects viewed her in the exact same way. Hinata will go over that with you, he assured her. I trust you to take care of the scientific side of things while she oversees the parts requiring jutsus. Just follow her lead and I will be happy. As you say, Otokage-sama. Karen said. What about the prisoners? What about them? Naruto asked. Nothing, she said quickly with a relieved smile. She'd been worried that he might release some of the prisoners Orochimaru had taken. Whole ninja clans had been imprisoned and turned into test subjects. Letting them go would ruin years of precious experimentation and data gathering. Well then, why don't you go tell your staff you'll have a new boss soon? And that I'll have them come in to swear to me shortly. Yes, Otokage-sama, Karen said and left his office. She was very happy. It looked like all the old policies would remain in place. Naruto swiveled in his chair a bit due that he was facing his wife. She wasn't showing it much, but his nose could pick up her heavy discontent. You're not happy about this? He asked mildly. No, Naruto-kun, I'm not, she told him. I never said anything about Orochimaru's experiments while he was alive. But now that he'd gone and you're in charge, they should be stopped. They're an abomination. They also led him to create the curse seal, the body replacement technique, as well as Edo Tense, the resurrection technique. Think of all the wonders that remain undiscovered, and the things that remain to be perfected. But some things shouldn't be learned. She blurted out. Naruto-kun, I've accepted a lot of things since coming here as the price of being with you. I saw the things Orochimaru and Kabuto were working on and said nothing because I knew we had no choice but to stay here. Without his protection we would have been in even more danger than we already were. But things have changed now. She looked at her husband and brought her hands together to plead to him. You finally have the power now, Naruto-kun. Can't we stop doing these horrible things and make this village something wonderful? But it is something wonderful, Hinata-chan, he said as he came to his feet. He slipped his arms around her hips and pulled her close to him. He pressed her soft feminine body to him and looked into her gentle eyes. Oto is a fantastic village that is only going to keep expanding and growing in power and influence. Don't you like the people who live here? Aren't they good folk? Every bit as worthy as the people who live in Konoha. Well, yes, that's true. The regular people and even most of the shinobi are good people, she admitted. The way he was looking into her eyes was making her heart beat faster. She loved him so much. She had never for even one moment regretted her decision to abandon her village to come be with him. The village itself is a fantastic place, it's the things that happen in the camps and the secret bases that I want to stop. He smiled in her and stroked the side of her neck with a single gloved finger. He saw her eyes close as a small shiver ran through her. Every ninja village has its dark side, Hinata-chan, things that are absolutely necessary but are kept hidden. What are ninja after all? We're assassins, spies, and thieves, that's what we are. You can't pretend that we're monks or innocent sheep herders. I mean, do you really think the other villages don't have places like that too? Even Konoha. You saw how they treated me, do you think they wouldn't be just as cruel to prisoners and criminals? And what about Konoha? She asked. What about it? He answered. He was still smiling, but the tiniest bit of unhappiness was building behind his blue eyes. You know I mean to take revenge on them for that they did to me. I never kept that secret from you. I know, but, can't you forgive them? She placed her hands on his cheek. Can't you forgive at least some of them? If they submit to me and swear to serve only me, I'll spare them. He saw she was going to argue and went on. I promise you, Hinata-chan, I give you my word. If they surrender and swear fealty, I'll show mercy. He hadn't told her about his last conversation with Sasuke or about his promise. Making the same promise to her would cost nothing and would make her happy. Thank you, Naruto-kun, she said, pleased. She hadn't expected to get even that much. But what about the prisoners and the research? Can't we? He cut her off with a sudden kiss that made her toes curl. Hinata-chan, he said once he came back up for air. You do trust me, don't you, Hinata-chan? Of course, Naruto-kun, I trust you completely. She meant it too. Despite all the things he had done, he had never hurt her. And he had kept his promise from that long ago night that if she went with him he would marry her. No matter how many terrible things he did, he was her darling Naruto-kun and the only one who had ever truly loved her. Trust me that I know what I'm doing now. He gave her another lingering kiss. I need you, Hinata-chan. There is no one else who I can trust with this. You will help me, won't you? When he asked her like that, she knew there was no way she could refuse him. She would do anything for him. I will do it, she said. She still had her doubts, but for his sake she would push them aside and do what her Naruto-kun needed. Out in a field far from prying eyes, 100 men, women and children had been staked to the ground. They were all citizens of Fire Country who had been captured in a raid for this very purpose. He could hear some of them calling to him for mercy. He could hear some of the children crying and wailing. Neither the pleas nor the tears mattered to him. They weren't people anyway, they were just a means to an end. Removing a glove, he bit down on a thumb and ran through some hand signs. Kuchi Yase no Jutsu. There was a massive puff of black smoke that momentarily obscured the field. When it cleared, a gigantic black and purple snake towered over the helpless prisoners. Riding on his snout was Naruto. Naruto! How dare you summon me? You were permitted to sign the snake summoning seal, but only the master summoner is permitted to call on me. Where is Orochimaru? The snake loudly demanded. Orochimaru-sama, and somewhere in hell, I have no doubt, Naruto replied. That makes me master summoner now. He waved to the prisoners. I will show you the respect that is due you, Manda, 100 human sacrifices for each time I summon you. I just want you to acknowledge my new position. His forked tongue slipped out and stirred back and forth, letting him taste the air. It was filled with the mouth-watering scent of human terror. Their screams were also adding to his appetite. All right, the gigantic snake rumbled. I'll acknowledge you as the master summoner and the only one permitted to summon me. Show me respect and we will get along fine, otherwise I'll devour you too. Naruto bowed respectfully. I understand, Manda. Bon appétit. He disappeared in a flash of smoke and left Manda to enjoy his meal in peace. He returned to Oto well satisfied with his progress. He had all the power and knowledge Orochimaru had. Everything was on track. Jiraiya entered the Hokage's office without his typical smirk. What do you want? He asked with a snarl. Danzo looked at him without taking any apparent offense. I know that Sarutobi was your former sensei and you feel a certain loyalty to him. But I trust you still feel a greater loyalty to your village. Don't ask me too many questions about my loyalty or my opinion of you, he said. Now tell me what you want. Very well, Danzo answered. I want you to make a weapon that can kill the nine-tailed fox. Chapter 36, Come in. You want me to make a weapon to kill the Kyuubi? Jiraiya asked. Well sure, that shouldn't be too hard. Do you have any other small requests? Maybe while I'm at it I can invent a perpetual youth jutsu or turn lead into gold. I am being completely serious, Jiraiya, Danzo said. I know, that's what makes it so damn funny. Naruto must die, Danzo said in a calm voice. Konoha will never know real peace as long as he is out there. And your answer is to have me invent some magical weapon that can kill him. Shikamaru informs me that during their encounter he was impervious to both the Nara shadow techniques as well as the Yamanaka mind possession techniques. Naruto claimed that he was shielded against genjutsu and all other possession jutsus. Given the fact he is a seal master, that is likely to be no idle boast. Combined with the protection of the Kyuubi's chakra and his advanced healing, he is already more or less invulnerable to physical attacks. So how else is he to be killed? Jiraiya grimaced. When put that way it was a damn good question. So the solution you come up with is to have me whip up some sort of super weapon that can not only defeat his seals but his demonic chakra and healing ability? That's something not even the Yondaime could make. Do you even get what you're asking? Of course, Danzo replied, still calm. I am asking you for a miracle. The same sort of miracle the Yondaime provided all those years ago. Don't compare this to that. And why not? As before, the village is threatened with utter annihilation due to the power of the nine-tailed demon fox. Now as then we are defenseless against that power and must turn to one of our heroes for salvation. Will you turn your back on Konoha? Has it occurred to you that we wouldn't have to worry about Naruto seeking vengeance if the village had just treated him decently like the old man and Minato wanted? That would also be the case had he been placed within the Umbu from the very beginning as I suggested. You would have made him a living weapon, Jiraiya said contemptuously. He'd have been nothing but a mindless puppet. And so? Danzo replied, utterly unmoved. He would have been utterly loyal. He is the Yondaime's only son. You know that as well as I do, even if you won't admit to it publicly. Minato's last wish was to have the village treat him as a hero. At the very least we owed him the chance at a normal life. That was always Sarutobi's argument, Danzo said. And see where that sort of thinking has led us. He was always much too soft and sentimental. A leader must be absolutely ruthless. And I find it a bit strange, Jiraiya, to hear this argument coming from you now. At least Sarutobi acted on his convictions, misguided as they were. You never even met him until shortly before the Chunin exams. Had you been so concerned with his welfare, you might have at the very least checked in on him from time to time. Especially since I was the boy's godfather. Jiraiya thought. He was very glad that people didn't know about that. The shameful truth was that when Minato and Kushina both died, he was too consumed by grief to do what a godfather was supposed to do. The idea of taking responsibility and becoming Naruto's father was just too much for him. And so he'd run. He'd used the excuse of carrying out important missions for the village. He'd stayed away for years, never returning even to check in. He pretended to be carrying out his duty, but the sad truth was that he was doing just the opposite, running away from his duty to Minato and Naruto. Would things have been different if I had stayed? He wondered if the villagers would have treated the boy in the same way if he'd been officially adopted by one of the Sannin. Would that have been enough to get him decent treatment? Would that have been enough to change things? He would never know, and that was his own personal torment and shame. I made mistakes, Jiraiya admitted in a small voice. As did Sarutobi, Danzo replied patiently. It now falls upon me to correct those mistakes. Will you not set aside your personal feelings and help me? If not for my sake, then for the good of the village. For the good of the village. Jiraiya echoed dully. Funny how the worst and bloodiest crimes are usually excused with those words. Destroying a traitor and safeguarding the village is no crime. The causes and the mistakes are all in the past now, all that is left to us is to solve the problem. Do you have some other solution? Jiraiya would have loved nothing better than to have given him one. But try as he might, he didn't have one. It was obvious that no matter the reason, there was no chance of talking to Naruto now. No chance that he would ever be anything but Konoha's enemy. Sadly, the Toad Sunin shook his head. Then you agree with me that he has to be destroyed? Yes, he hated saying it, but that was the truth of their situation they were now in. Naruto would never be a friend, and he was far too powerful to be left alone. What did that leave? Then you will do as I ask. With a defeated sigh, Jiraiya nodded. All right, I'll help. They were outside a decrepit and run-down brick apartment building. Outside, garbage was piled up and a couple scrawny dogs were digging through to find whatever they could. Nearby, a weary old bum sat in the middle of the sidewalk drinking from a bottle. He seemed oblivious to the world around him, more a part of the scenery than an actual person. The few people walking past avoided stepping on him, but otherwise failed to even notice. This was one of the poorest slums in Nagamo, a place you came to only when you had absolutely nowhere else to go. I've seen nicer looking prisons, Zabuza quipped. Naruto silently grinned. He liked the way Zabuza always spoke his mind. It was a refreshing change from all those who mindlessly agreed with him and always tried to tell him what he wanted to hear, whether it was the truth or not. Since becoming Otokage a couple months before, he'd noticed it was harder and harder to find people to tell him what they really thought. And it hadn't been that easy before when he was only the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Are you sure she's here? As sure as I can be, Zabuza said with a shrug. She's damn hard to track down. So I've noticed, Naruto said dryly. We are fairly certain it is her, Naruto-sama, Haku said politely. As per your orders, we did not attempt to contact her directly. Naruto nodded. If they had tried to confront her, there would have been a fight, or she would have tried to run. More likely there would have been a fight and she would have tried to run. The once proud Kuniki had been reduced to a life in the shadows like some common thief. All she could do these days was run and hide from all those who were so keen on trying to find her. Is this stupid bitch even worth the trouble? Tayuya asked loudly. Like Zabuza, she also was not afraid to speak her mind. Well, she is a Sunin, Naruto said. And the last of the Senju and the world's top medical ninja and expert on medical jutsus. That makes her pretty special. I guess they aren't paying medic nins what they used to then, Zabuza joked. Most of the Sound 7 had a good laugh at that. Well, it's hard to find work when you have to spend all your time hiding from your creditors, Naruto said. All of you wait here. He then leapt down from the roof of the building. He landed before the front door and simply walked inside. She was all alone now. She had no one left in her life anymore. Shizune had stayed by her side for a long while. She had tried to get her to change her ways without success and had stood by her much longer than she should have. But finally even she had despaired and given up. She'd said her goodbyes and returned to Konoha to begin a new life. Tsunade didn't blame her. How long could you expect someone to put up with babysitting an old drunk like her? Eventually Shizune had been forced to give up. She tried to convince her to return with her right up until the moment she left. Alone in her room, she made a rude noise and reached for a bottle. Return to Konoha? For what? So that she could be reminded of all the things she'd lost? To return to the village that had taken her two loved ones? No. No, there was nothing in Konoha for her anymore. In the end, a tearful Shizune had left to return to Konoha alone. That was how the 60-year-old Tsunade had found herself all alone in a cramped, roach-infested, moldy apartment. She tried to drink from the bottle but found it was disappointingly empty. She was surrounded by empty beer and sake bottles. Looking around blearily, she wondered if they were all empty. If so, she wondered if she had enough money to go out and get more. If not, she would have to scrounge around to find some sort of work. In spite of her age, she was still immensely strong physically. She could henge into a rough-looking man and find some manual labor. It didn't pay much, but it would be enough to take care of the rent here and get her more booze. Things like food and other necessities she didn't worry too much about. It was also much safer for her than trying to find work as a medic nin. In what had to be one of the all-time great ironies, she, the world's acknowledged top expert on medical jutsu, could no longer practice her trade. Even with a henge it was impossible. The moment word spread about some unknown medic nin got out, there would be a swarm of bounty hunters and investigators looking for her. She had racked up debts totaling just under 50 million ryu. She had borrowed money from banks, nobles, governments, and even loan sharks. Now all of them were looking for her and demanding repayment. Those to whom she owed at least 1 million would also be demanding she hand over her sole remaining asset to them, the Shode's necklace. She looked at the crystal hanging by its chain about her neck. With it you could buy 2 gold mines and the mountains on top of them. Even now she could sell it and have enough to pay her entire debt off and still have more than enough left over for a comfortable retirement. Why don't I then? She muttered to herself. She wasn't sure she had enough to buy herself a bottle of rot gut, but she had a fortune literally in the palm of her hand. All she had to do was sell it. Despite asking the question out loud, she knew she could never part with it. She was ready to die alone and in poverty first. It was all she had left of the 2 people she had loved the most. Nawaki, her little brother, and Dan, the one true love of her life. Selling the necklace would be like truly saying goodbye to them forever. That was foolish. They were both long dead now, but she couldn't bear to part with it just the same. It was at that instant that a polite knock sounded from the front door. She glanced at the door nervously. Rent was not due until the end of the week and she had not ordered anything. These days unexpected visitors were always unwelcome. She glanced at the windows and began mapping out escape routes in her head. She was ready to leave with nothing but the necklace and the clothes on her back. She'd done it before. As if picking out her thoughts, a voice came from the door. Please let me in, honored Tsunade-sama. I give you my word, all I want to do is talk. You should also know I have ninja waiting outside. If you try to run, they have orders to bring you down with as much force as is necessary. I would like to avoid that. I want things to remain pleasant. Pleasant, right, just who the hell are you? Bill collectors didn't usually bother asking to chat. I am Lord Uzumaki Naruto, Otokage, and holder of the 9-tailed demon fox. Uzumaki. Despite being constantly on the move and in hiding, she still knew about the events connected to him. Sliding back a dead bolt, she opened the door just a crack in order to get a look at him. He was dressed in a ridiculous orange and black outfit that included gloves. He had a Hittite with a musical note stamped into it. On each cheek were 3 whiskers like scars and he had spiky blonde hair. But what really caught her attention were his eyes. They were the exact same shade of blue as Minato's had been, and looking at his face he looked just like a teenage Minato. There was no mistaking just whose son he was. He stood there and smiled at her, making no effort to force his way in. May I come in? She stood there a moment just staring. Then finally stood aside and opened the door wide. All right, come in. Chapter 37, A Bloody Path. Looking around at the tiny apartment, Naruto felt an odd sense of nostalgia. The trash on the floor, the mold, the rickety furniture, even the dishes piled in the sink all reminded him of his old apartment. The only real difference was that it would have been cups of instant ramen covering every nook and cranny instead of empty bottles of liquor. Well, I was always the village pariah, is a Sunin. How the mighty have fallen. He was very careful to mask his thoughts as he entered, but there was no way Tsunade could not know they were there. She knew how this pigsty had to reflect on her. Since Shizune's departure she had stopped caring about appearances. I hope you'll excuse the mess, I wasn't expecting company. She waved to one of the chairs by the table. Will you have a seat? Sure, Naruto said and sat down at the small table covered by empty bottles. He really wasn't bothered by the mess or by the surroundings. One of the slight advantages of having grown up poor. Thank you for agreeing to talk to me. I would have sent someone to set up a meeting, but I trust you understand why I didn't think I could do that. You were probably afraid I'd vanish. Tsunade took the other seat across from him. Yes, Naruto answered blandly. He'd done his research and Tsunade had a reputation for being almost painfully blunt. He figured she would appreciate it if he was straightforward. From the very slight approving nod she gave him he thought he'd guessed right. From her place across the table she surveyed the man who was causing so much worry. "I knew both your parents," she said cautiously. "If you'd like I could tell you about them." Well, if you don't mind I'd like to find about my mom." Tsunade could keep from lifting an eyebrow in surprise. "What about your father?" "I don't need to hear about him," Naruto smiled as he spoke, but there was a clear chill to his words. "I heard more than enough about the great Yondaime back in school." "All right," she leaned back in her chair, never letting her eyes leave his. "Is it true you killed that snake Orochimaru?" "I know the official story is he died of an illness, but no one believes that." "Yes, I did," he answered directly. "I hope that doesn't anger you, my killing your former teammate." She shrugged. "We stopped being teammates or even friends a long time ago. His being dead makes the world a better place." "I'm glad you think so." The two of them sat there in a momentary silence. Naruto still had the same intense and passionate nature he always had, but his time with Orochimaru had taught him the value of patience and of silence. He counted it as a small victory that Tsunade was the next one to speak. "So just why are you here, Uzumaki? What does Konoha's greatest enemy want to talk about?" He gave her his friendliest smile and spread his hands. "Isn't it obvious? I want you to join me. Kakashi-sensei." Kakashi halted and looked up from his book. Beneath his mask he gave her a hidden smile. "Hello, Sakura." Sakura stared for a moment. It was odd to look at his face and see two eyes staring back at her. The fact the eyes were mismatched added to her sense of the bizarre. One was a pale gray while the other was a muddy brown. The fact his highlight was worn straight across his forehead now rather than at an angle also seemed odd. "Hello, sensei," she managed a weak smile and did her best to pretend her whole world had not fallen apart. If you have some time, would you mind getting some tea with me? I was hoping I could talk to you about some things." He'd known she'd come to talk to him sooner or later. He knew just what sort of questions she would ask him too. He shut his book with a snap and put it away. He wasn't sure if she would really want to hear his answers, but he owed her at least that much. "That sounds great, Sakura, let's go." "No," Tsunade replied instantly. Naruto continued to smile, he hadn't expected anything else for an initial reaction. "No? Just like that? Ah, come on, at least let me tell you what I have to offer you first." "Let me guess," she said, not bothering to hide her scorn. "Money, power, and anything else I want. Is that about right?" "You say it like it's a small thing." Pointedly he looked about the room. "For someone hiding out in a place like this, don't you think a little money and power sounds good? I'm prepared to pay off all your debts and give you a place of honor at my right hand. Come to Oto and serve me faithfully and I'll give you total authority over the medical corps, you can shape into whatever you like." Tsunade put her head back and laughed. "Serve you faithfully? You've got balls to say that to me, brat. Your father could have said that and I might have listened." "I'm not my father," Naruto said coldly. "I know, and that's a real pity, he'd be ashamed to see you now." "Would he be more or less ashamed of how Sarutobi and the village treated me?" She gave a slight nod. "Oh, from what I hear there was plenty of shame to go around. Believe me, I lost my faith in the village a long time ago. I know how Konoha devours its ninja, what happened to you was bad, but it's not my concern. You're lucky I feel that way too, otherwise I might have attacked you. You'd have died if you had." She'd heard tough talk from people before and normally dismissed it. From the man who had slaughtered most of Konoha's Umbu at the Valley of the End and taken out Orochimaru with ease, she decided a little caution was in order. "If you're so powerful, why are you bothering to recruit me?" "Orochimaru-sensei had a high opinion of you," Naruto replied. "I only ever heard him talk that way about 3 people, you, Sarutobi, and Uchiha Itachi. I figured anyone who could impress him was worth chasing after." "What about Jiraiya?" "Orochimaru always thought he was an idiot and too easy to distract." Naruto chuckled sourly. "I've run into him a few times too and I can't say I was impressed either." "Jiraiya is an idiot and a pervert to boot," Tsunade agreed. However, he is as deserving of the title Sunin as me or your old teacher. What he lacks in cleverness he more than made up for in heart and guts. Sure, Naruto agreed in a voice that clearly said he didn't. Anyway, while I'm flattered by your offer, my answer is still no. So unless you were serious about wanting to hear stories about your mom, I think you should go. With respect, Lady Tsunade, you still haven't heard my full offer. I still have much more I could give you. Like what? Secret jutsus? A chest full of gems? My own army? She shook her head. None of that interests me. I didn't think it would, Naruto answered with a hint of smugness. If you could be satisfied so easily, someone would have done it a long time ago. What you want though is much harder to provide. You want the people you loved most to come back to you. You want to see your precious little brother Nawaki and your lover Dan again. That's the real reason you still have that necklace, isn't it? Because it's a reminder of them. You'd rather live in squalor and drink yourself to death than part with that last reminder of them. Tsunade brought her hand up and slapped it down on the table. It shattered into pieces. She then reached out and grabbed Naruto by the collar, hauling him to his feet. Her other hand glowed with chakra and was balled into a fist. How dare you? She screamed into his face. Who the hell do you think you are to bring them up and talk about them like they were chips on a poker table? They've been dead longer than you've been alive. The only reason I don't beat you to death right now is because I once loved your parents. Get the hell out of here before I lose my patience. Naruto made no effort to pull away from her or defend himself, at least not deliberately. The red chakra flowed out of him and formed a cloak around his body as it always did when he was in danger. His absolute defense required no conscious thought on his part. Tsunade grunted as she was forced to let go of him as the chakra covered his front and freed him of her grip. Despite her anger, she took a step back. She could feel the immense power flowing off of him. She was certain any ninja within at least a mile would be able to feel it as well. The cloak formed only a single tail. Forgive me, Lady Tsunade, he said and gave her a bow that was in no way mocking. I didn't mean to offend you. When I brought up Nawaki and Dan, I wasn't trying to mock you. I can give them back to you, not exactly as they were, but close enough. I can make them return to this world with all their memories and feelings of love for you. They won't be truly alive, but it will be them in every way that matters. What the hell kind of con are you trying to pull? She demanded. What, you think you can create some kind of illusion and that will be enough to make me serve you? What I'm offering is much more than some cheap genjutsu. Orochimaru created a technique that could force the spirits of the dead to return to the land of the living. The jutsu hasn't been perfected yet, the effects are only temporary, but I can make them permanent eventually. I can give you back the people you love. I don't believe you, she snapped. You'd say anything to try and trick me. He nodded. I wouldn't expect you to believe something like that without proof, that's why I brought some with me. As if at a prearranged signal, there was a knock at the front door. Otokage? Are you all right? Just fine, Haku. He'd expected that at some point he would release some of his demonic chakra either on purpose or in self-defense. He'd left instructions of what to do when that happened. Is our special guest with you? She is Otokage-sama, Haku replied. She is most eager to speak with Tsunade-sama. Naruto looked back at a somewhat worried Tsunade. I have someone here who can convince you that what I say is true. Will you allow her to come in? I assure you that she is no threat to you. Who is it? She asked. An old friend of yours, someone you haven't seen in a long time. He refused to say any more. She eyed the door. She had a sick feeling in the pit of her stomach. Somehow the thought of what might be behind that door scared her more than having the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki not 5 feet away. Can she come in, Lady Tsunade? She doesn't have that much time. What is that supposed to mean? Naruto merely grinned at her. He may look like Minato, but he reminds me more of Orochimaru. Fine, whoever it is, let her in. Naruto went to the door and opened it himself. Come in, Tsunade is eager to see you again. A young woman of no more than 16 or 17 stepped tentatively into the room, glancing about before spotting Tsunade. She was dressed in a green and brown jacket and dark gray trousers. Her weapons pouches and the grace of her movement proclaimed her a kunoichi. As she stepped inside and got a good look at Tsunade, a wide smile of relief covered her face. Tsunade. It's so good to see you. Arms open, she ran over to her without hesitation. Seeing her face, Tsunade paled. Me. Mia? Hyuga Mia. It's so good to see you. The girl exclaimed and wrapped her arms around Tsunade as she hugged her. Everything's been so confusing, I don't know what's happened to me. The last thing I remember was being in a huge battle against Hanzo and his men in Rain Country. The next thing I knew I was here. What's going on? Is Aki okay? I lost track of him during the fighting. Aki had been her fiancé and another member of the Hyuga clan. Both he and Mia had been part of the Leaf Army that had fought in the battle where Tsunade, Orochimaru, and Jiraiya had received the title of Sunin from Hanzo himself. Hanzo had so honored them because they alone had survived. Every other Leaf Nin had died that day, including Aki and Mia. They were both more than 20 years dead. He's fine, Tsunade croaked. As she did so, she forced chakra to pulse through her system, desperately hoping this was some sort of genjutsu. When nothing changed, she was forced to admit it was not. She hadn't thought about Mia in more than a decade, but looking in the girl's face it was like being back in time. This was Hyuga Mia, of that she was certain. Do you remember the shopping trip we took a couple weeks before the battle? You mean in that little town in grass? The one with the ivory carvings you liked? I remember you were thinking about buying that little cat carving but didn't want to spend the ryu. That's right, she answered with a sickly grin. That town had been annihilated less than 3 months later with all the civilians there slaughtered. The only people who'd been present with her had been Dan, Aki, and Mia. It was impossible that Naruto could know about a little ivory cat she'd been interested in back before he was ever born. So do you believe me? Naruto asked. She looked at him past the girl who was still hugging her and nodded. Yes. Glad to hear it, he said and made a single hand sign of negation. Ah. Mia cried out in sudden fear. What's wrong? Tsunade asked and began casting a diagnostic jutsu to find out what it was. The problem quickly became self-evident as Mia's body began to revert to ash. The girl sent her friend a last frightened look before falling at her feet. As Tsunade watched Mia's form crumbled away to reveal the body of a stranger, a lifeless corpse of some ninja covered in ashes. Naruto explained. Like I said, the jutsu is only temporary and can be used only once per soul. Your grandfather and granduncle were already summoned by Orochimaru and can never be summoned again. He deliberately left out the fact that his father had also been summoned previously. That's why I didn't try to summon Nawaki or Dan. I'll wait until I have the jutsu perfected. It may take years, but I'm confident I can do it. When that time comes, I'll bring them back for you. Tsunade stared at him open-mouthed. The revelation of what she had just seen was starting to hit her. It really might be possible, she might really see them again. She looked back at the body at her feet. This jutsu, it requires a human sacrifice to work, doesn't it? That's right, Naruto replied. For a human soul to be brought back, one has to be sacrificed. Of course I'll need lots of human test subjects in order to perfect it. Part of your job will be to assist me in that. I hope you don't object, every great achievement requires some cost after all. She stared down at the corpse and then at Naruto. She understood the devil's bargain he was offering her. As a medic nin, she had always hated war and pointless death. When she'd heard about Orochimaru's experiments, she'd been disgusted. She'd thought him a monster for being able to use human beings as nothing but experimental fodder, exterminating countless lives all for the sake of knowledge. She'd known that she could never do the same. Now if she wanted to see Dan and Nawaki again, she would have to wade through human blood. Naruto wasn't trying to trick her, his offer was plain and clear. She understood that if she accepted it, she would never be able to refuse anything he commanded of her. No crime would ever be too hideous or revolting. She would walk in Orochimaru's footsteps and do it willingly. A path that would someday bring her loved ones back to her. Will you serve me, Lady Tsunade? He held his hand out to her. Will you proclaim me your lord and follow me of your own free will? Perhaps if Shizune hadn't gone, she would have found the strength to say no. Perhaps if she weren't all alone. Perhaps if she were still practicing medicine and helping people rather than spending all her time hiding and getting drunk. And perhaps she was just making excuses, perhaps she would have given the same answer no matter what once she realized what he was offering was possible. I will. Her voice was weak, barely above a whisper, but loud enough for him to hear her. Swear it then, he commanded. She fell slowly to her knees and lowered her face. I swear to serve you in all ways and in all things for as long as I shall live, my lord Uzumaki Naruto. Good, he said, sounding extremely satisfied. Now up on you feet, Tsunade, we have a long way back to Oto and a lot of work ahead of us. Chapter 38, A Special Envoy. Sakura stared down into her cup of tea. So Naruto wouldn't have done anything if he hadn't been attacked by Shikamaru and the others. Her voice was empty and lifeless. That's what he said, Kakashi told her. Though he only said that after Root put in its appearance, so he might have said it only to cause Sasuke and me mental anguish. I'm not sure how far I would trust anything he says. You and Sasuke-kun and Lord Sarutobi must have believed some, or you never would have gone to him in the first place. Kakashi looked about the crowded tea room to see if anyone might have overheard. Lower your voice, Sakura. Some things are very dangerous to say. If the fifth Hokage heard you say that, you'd be arrested immediately. Sakura gave a weary nod. As the new Hokage Danzo had gone out of his way to disguise his minor coup. The villagers and most of the ninja believed Sarutobi had finally decided to retire. It was not hard to believe, the man was well into his 70s after all. Danzo had been a very powerful man in the village for over 2 decades. His selection as 5th Hokage had been slightly surprising only because he was as old as Sarutobi. Most felt he was just a placeholder until someone younger could be chosen, but he was strong and intelligent even at his advanced age. Most people felt the village was in good hands. He would definitely not be happy with anyone connecting Sarutobi with a mission sent to Naruto. So it really was my fault, she said in a tired voice. She might have started crying except she thought she was completely out of tears. Sasuke died because of what I did. That's not necessarily true, Sakura. Remember, Naruto had already violated our agreement by having the Sound 7 there. Kakashi said. He likely intended to betray us all along. Sasuke understood that was a real possibility the moment we agreed to go and meet with him. You can't know that though. Maybe he would have listened. If I hadn't told Shikamaru. He reached out and took her hand. Sakura, you need to be strong. Sasuke would want you to be strong. Though he was upset with her for what she had done, she was the last of his students he could still help. She pulled her hand away from him and got to her feet. Thank you for telling me the truth, Kakashi-sensei. I think I'll go now. He saw a defeated look in her eye that set off alarm bells. Sakura, don't blame yourself and please don't do anything stupid. She gave him the palest copy of a smile. Don't worry, sensei, I'm fine. A month later, the Otokage was at his desk going over a request he'd received for an audience. What do you think? He handed the letter over to his newest advisor. Tsunade took it and read through it carefully. Her arrival in Oto had struck the ninja world like a bolt from the blue. In spite of her many years wandering about acquiring debts, her name had remained one of the most respected in the elemental lands. She remained the last of the great Senju clan and the granddaughter of the man who had founded Konoha. She was still a Sannin and the #1 medical ninja in all the world. Wealthy men from all over the continent were already busy scheduling appointments to see her for various medical ills. Leaders both great and small were impressed that she had chosen to join Oto, and the village's reputation was enhanced. Likewise, these same leaders assumed there had to be something fundamentally wrong with Konoha to drive her to abandon the village her grandfather had created. Overnight, the Leaf's reputation began to suffer, and there were serious questions as to how strong the village really was. Danzo and his village struck back with claims that Tsunade had to be acting under some sort of coercion, that she would never willingly betray the village. They spread stories that she was under some type of mind control or being forced to serve in order to pay off her huge debts. A smear campaign was begun to portray her as a Ryu less drunk, no longer to be found sober. These efforts by Danzo were destined to fail, as many important people traveled to Oto and met her. Anyone who met her in the flesh soon saw she was hale and healthy and as intelligent and willful as she had ever been. It was also clear she was acting of her own accord. That was all for public consumption. Behind the scenes she was greatly disturbed by the facilities and programs that had been established by Orochimaru and then kept in place by Naruto. The things she saw sickened her. Yet she would not refuse to work for him. It was just as she'd known it would be when she made her agreement with him. Now along with everything else he also had her acting as an advisor. Is this a serious request? She asked first. It's much more likely to be just another ruse. That letter was delivered to me through the ambassador from Cloud, Naruto informed her. He vouches for its authenticity. If it's real then it's likely an assassination attempt. Naruto surprised her by shaking his head. No, if they were going to try anything like that they would use back channels and insist on a meeting in a neutral location. Like what happened with Kakashi and Sasuke. If they ask for this right out in the open and agree to come here then they'll be bound to act in good faith. If they were to try and use this to set up an attempt on my life it would completely destroy their diplomatic credibility. Their agreements wouldn't be worth the paper they were written on. Even among ninja there are limits. Maybe they're hoping you'll use it as an excuse for an assassination and have your reputation destroyed. Tsunade said. It wouldn't surprise me, the Otokage said. Those people still see me as either an idiot or mindless brute. You're not actually going to accept their offer, are you? Naruto laughed. Are you kidding? Of course I'm accepting it. How can I say no to seeing a dear old friend again? From what I hear the last time you met a couple dear old friends one died and the other lost an eye, she said dryly. I hope this meeting goes a bit better. I've known him a long time, and while feelings aren't exactly good between us I still respect him and don't want him to be killed. He and I went through a lot together before things went bad. I won't hurt him, Naruto promised. I'll treat him with even more honor than a Sannin deserves. I just want to talk to him face to face about a few things, that's all. At about the same time the Otokage was making his reply, Nara Shikamaru had arrived in the ninja village of Ame and was delivered to a secluded temple where he was to meet the living god who ruled over Rain Country. The interior of the temple was hardly luxurious and did not seem very accommodating for a leader of a ninja village, never mind a god. Shikamaru was delivered to an audience chamber and told to wait there. It was not long before a figure with orange hair and multiple facial piercings entered. He was dressed in a black robe with red clouds. I understand you are here as a representative of the 5th Hokage Danzo to deliver some proposal. Shikamaru turned to face him dressed in umbu armor and his deer mask in place. He bowed and then spoke. I trust one am speaking not only to the leader of Omegakuur but of the criminal organization Akatsuki. I am indeed the leader of the Rain Ninja. As to the other I will not deny I have connections to Akatsuki, though I do not claim the title of leader. You wouldn't be wearing that if you didn't want to stress you were part of Akatsuki, Shikamaru thought. And you are its leader whether you choose to admit to it or not. I have come bearing an offer on behalf of the Hokage. He drew a scroll from a pocket. It bears his signature and seal. Shikamaru performed a specific hand gesture to deactivate a jutsu that had been placed on it. Had anyone else but him touched it the scroll would have burst into flame. What was written on the paper with the Hokage's hand would have gotten him executed if it fell into the wrong hands, no chances could be taken with it. Shikamaru handed the document over to the leader of Akatsuki. The man broke open the wax seal with his thumb and unrolled it. He read what was written without comment or any sort of obvious reaction. At last when he was done he rolled it up again. Your Hokage requests an assassination, and an extremely difficult one. The conditions he adds make it even more so. Not only is the target a powerful ninja, he asks that it be performed within a ninja village during a formal conference. A very difficult task. Which is why the Hokage is willing to pay such a high price. 50 million ryu, half immediately and half payable upon completion of the task. The man looked at the rolled up scroll for a moment, then gave just the slightest of nods and put the document away in his robe. Tell your Hokage to transfer the funds. On behalf of my organization I accept this contract. We're going to help Danzo. Konan asked, utterly bewildered. After what he did to us. How can you help him? I am not helping him, Pain answered. This act will seal his fate in Konoha's. Konan stared at him. I don't understand. He drew the scroll out and held it in his hands. Trust in me, This will aid us in our revenge, and I find it fitting to accept his blood money in payment of a service that will ruin him." When all the preparations had been made, the special envoy from Konoha arrived at the gates of Oto. As agreed, he had with him only 2 Jonin bodyguards. He was greeted at the gate not only by Tsunade, Uzumaki Hinata, and the Sound Seven, but by the Otokage himself. Normal protocol would call for the envoy to be escorted to the tower, where he would be granted an audience. By meeting him at the gate, Naruto was granting the man a special privilege and showing him an unusual amount of honor. The envoy bowed upon meeting him face to face. "I thank you for receiving me, Lord Uzumaki Naruto Otokage-sama." Resplendent in his white and orange robes, Naruto easily returned the bow. "Welcome to Otogakure, Lord Hiruzen Sarutobi, 3rd Hokage of Konohagakure. I welcome you and promise no harm shall fall upon you." Chapter 39, Old Friends. The initial formalities out of the way, the two men eyes each other. As Sarutobi was now a retired leader of the village, he was no longer permitted to wear the Hokage robes. He was instead dressed in black ninja gear. Naruto looked him over carefully, then gave a broad smile and noted his main impression. "I remember you being a lot bigger." "To a 12-year-old I am huge," Sarutobi replied. That brought out a snort of laughter from Naruto. "I must admit I was not sure what sort of reception I would receive." Naruto knew exactly what Sarutobi was referring to. "Afraid you'd have a little accident on the way here." "I confess the thought had crossed my mind," Sarutobi admitted. "You and the Sand Nins are the ones who keep sending assassins after me. In the entire time since I left the village, I haven't sent even one of my ninja after anyone inside Konoha. I've done my best to behave honorably." "Does that include what you did to Sasuke and Kakashi?" Sarutobi asked coolly. Naruto just wagged a finger at him. Old man, you don't get to call me on that when I was attacked by the Umbu before I did anything. I know how much you and Konoha love to play the part of innocent victim, but we both know that meeting was a sham from the start. The only question was whose trap would work better. Don't complain to me just because yours failed and mine didn't. The offer I made was genuine, Naruto." He sounded weary and heartsick. "I never would have allowed it to go forward if I had known you no longer felt a connection to your former teammates." "What are you talking about, old man? I let Kakashi live, didn't I? Do you think I would have done that if I didn't still have a little bit of feeling for my old team? Then what about Sasuke?" "I considered Sasuke a friend," Naruto said. "But I had to use him to achieve my goal." Naruto continued to smile as he said that, and there was nothing in his voice or manner to suggest he was bothered by the admission. To use others to achieve your ends was a part of ninja life. Even so, Sarutobi found it hard to stomach. "That is not the way of the leaf, Naruto. We do not sacrifice our own so casually." Naruto tilted his head a bit as he stared at the other man. "Our own? I haven't been a leaf nin in a long time." He decided to look past the 2 guards at the 2 jonin who accompanied him. One he didn't recognize, but the other was familiar. "Kiba. Long time no see. I almost didn't recognize you without Akamaru. I haven't seen you since kicking your ass back in the preliminaries." The Inuzuka let out a low growl. "I think you should know that the only reason I don't rip you apart is that I'm under orders not to." In an instant a perfect circle of kunai fell around him. All the other members of the Sound Seven were sending him warning looks. Naruto took no offense and laughed it off. "Well, I can see you haven't changed any since the academy. I assume you have some secret messages for Hinata." Kiba was able to keep any expression of fear or worry from his face, but Naruto caught the slightest whiff of it in his scent and knew he'd hit the mark. "You can give them to her, I'm not going to stop you or ask to read them first. You can also tell the Hyuga that if they want to contact her they can use the regular post. Why don't you go ahead and talk to her? I'm sure she'd love the chance to catch up with an old teammate." "I would," Hinata spoke up eagerly. Kiba glanced at Sarutobi, and at the Third Lord's slight nod he went over to speak in private with her. "Why don't we head over to the tower now?" Naruto asked politely. "Yes, let's," Sarutobi agreed. As Hinata and Kiba wandered off to talk, Naruto and Sarutobi began to casually walk down the street side by side. Tsunade walked with them, looking unhappy and grim. The Sound Seven spread out wide to give them plenty of room and to keep watch over them from every angle. As they walked, Naruto's bodyguards did not try to clear a path for them. Without being ordered to the civilians in Otonin they came across automatically provided in wide berth. Sarutobi was caught off guard by the lack of fear in the people they passed. Again and again, civilians and ninja alike would call out to Naruto with a friendly wave saying hello or wishing him a good morning. For his part Naruto would always respond, answering, and returning the greetings. Otokage-sama. A group of young children approached them with no fear at all. A little girl of perhaps 7 or 8 was out in front of them calling to him. "Come and play with us." Laughing Naruto nodded. "Sure Yukari-chan." He ran through some hand signs and a shadow clone puffed into life. The children all gave a loud cheer as the clone went off to play with them. Naruto could see the old man's amazement. "They're orphans," he explained. "We have the best run and best funded orphanage in the elemental lands. I play with the kids every single day and I make sure they're being well treated and well fed. I know how rough it can be, so I try and make sure none of them are ever lonely." He sounded very proud. "I see. I will admit to being most surprised at the way the people accept you," Sarutobi replied carefully. "Their affections seem genuine." Naruto had no trouble understanding what lay underneath the underneath. "You shouldn't believe your own propaganda. What were you expecting? The whole village cowering in fear? Them running away at the very sight of me? Why would they? I am their Kage, their leader and protector. A Kage lives to guide and protect his village. Why on earth would they be afraid of me? This is how the villagers in Nin and Konoha treated you. Did you really expect it to be different?" His smile remained but his eyes took on a bitter cast. "People don't hate me here, this isn't Konoha, you know. No one here goes around thinking the Kyuubi is suddenly going to burst out of me. It is good that the people have faith in you, Naruto," Sarutobi said quietly. "But even you will admit there are reasons why I might wonder about that." His face twisted in distaste. "I know something about your research facilities and the sorts of things that go on there. Those projects have nothing to do with the village or the villagers. Everything that touches a Kage must affect the village to some degree." "Sure," Naruto said. "Now tell me that in all the years you ran the village you never once did anything you'd be ashamed to tell to the civilians." Sarutobi grimaced slightly. "I will not claim to have been any sort of saint. It is impossible to be the leader of a ninja village whose purpose for existence is violence and not commit certain crimes. When it was for the benefit of the village I did not hesitate to commit all sorts of cruelty." Naruto nodded. He was glad the old man was at least being honest about how things really were. Assassinations, kidnappings, arson, espionage, blackmail, the list goes on and on, doesn't it? I know how it is. Every Kage has to wear 2 faces, the one they show to the people and the one they have in private. Growing up I always saw you as a kindly grandfather the way most people did. I would never have imagined you sitting in your office going over lists deciding if a certain monk or businessman needed to be killed or needed to be threatened. The truth is a Kage can't afford to be a really good person." "Perhaps not," Sarutobi admitted. "Yet we can still hold ourselves up to a certain ethical standard. Some things are wrong and simply cannot be excused." "Oh? You mean like butchering an entire clan and then allowing your loyal ninja to take the blame for it? Like letting an innocent child suffer years of abuse because it's simpler than trying to force an entire village into acting like decent human beings? Like sending assassins out after a fellow Kage? I have done none of those things, but you have. It seems to me where you draw that line is all a matter of personal choice. Don't condemn me for doing what is best for my village just as you did." Sarutobi appeared fearful. He glanced over at Tsunade and spoke in a low voice. How did you know? You mean about the Uchiha?" Naruto answered in the same low voice. "Don't underestimate my intelligence network. I have eyes and ears in the most interesting places." "I see." When he returned to Konoha he would need to talk to Danzo about going through and investigating not only the entire government. Their security had obviously been badly compromised. What happened at that time was very difficult. I felt I had no choice but to. "I'm not Sasuke, you don't need to justify anything to me," Naruto told him. "My point is just that the village would be shocked to know that the kindly Hokage was the sort of man who could have women and children massacred right inside the village. Every ninja village has its dark side and its secret places. Don't try to pretend I'm somehow unique. Other villages don't use human beings for experimentation. Naruto laughed. Now we both know that's a lie. Prisoners and criminals get used for that all the time, even in Leaf. The only difference is that I'm doing it more efficiently and on a bigger scale. That is not something to be proud of, Naruto. You must shut down those vile camps of yours and end whatever revolting research you are pursuing. Naruto came to a sudden stop and turned fully on Sarutobi. Or what? He demanded. You'll send me to my room without supper? You'll send assassins after me? You'll declare war without actually doing anything? Don't threaten me, old man. I'm not the one who came here to beg for mercy. You are. Don't push your luck or you won't be going back. Naruto was yelling at the top of his lungs. Sarutobi stood there calmly facing a furious Naruto without so much as blinking. Tsunade came over to him and very carefully touched his arm, drawing his attention away from Sarutobi and onto her. Please calm down, Otokage, I'm sure the old man didn't mean any offense. Naruto took a deep breath and visibly reined himself back in. When he looked back at the former Hokage, his eyes were considering and judging. Naruto knew he'd made a very big mistake. The leader of a great village didn't suddenly lose his temper like that. Talking to the old man again after all this time was bringing back a lot of hard feelings. He resented like hell that lecturing tone. Sarutobi was not here to act as his protector. He was here to beg, nothing else. Sorry about that, third lord, he gave the man a respectful bow. Please forgive my rude outburst. It's quite all right, Sarutobi murmured. They began walking again. The request Danzo sent me specifically asked for a private meeting between you and Tsunade as well as one between us. When we get to the tower, why don't I let you and her talk? That would be much appreciated, Otokage-sama. The rest of the way to the tower they chattered about unimportant things. The meaningful words would wait until later. Hinata and Kiba were walking together down a side street. If they were being followed, Kiba couldn't pick out any particular scent. Here, Hinata-chan, this was written for you by your sister Hanabi. She's clan head now. Thank you, Kiba-kun. She took the sealed letter and slipped it into a pocket. Aren't you going to read it? Kiba asked in surprise. He'd expected her to tear it open in front of him. I'll read it later, Kiba-kun, I already know what's in it. Hanabi would be writing to me as clan head, not as a sister. I'm sure she'll remind me of my duties to clan and village and tell me I should try to escape. Kiba nodded. He hadn't read the thing, but he'd been given a verbal message from Hanabi to deliver in case the letter was confiscated. Hanabi and the rest of the clan still scream at the top of their lungs that you were kidnapped and are being held here against your will. She grinned at her old teammate. Do you think that too, Kiba-kun? Are you kidding? As many times as I saw you faint. She giggled. I know you were in love with him. I am in love with him, Kiba-kun. I am his wife now, Uzumaki Hinata, and I love him now more than ever. He killed your father Hinata, and my mother too, Kiba spoke with a snarl. How can you still love him after all the things he's done? Please don't pretend he was not forced to abandon Konoha. All Naruto-kun ever wanted was to be treated like any other ninja of the village. You know what it was like for him, you saw how the people were. Then after winning the Chunin selection exams, the one person he trusted most betrayed him. Wow, Naruto's got you well trained. How long did it take you to get all that crap memorized? Kiba-kun. Please don't be nasty. He killed my mother, Kiba repeated. And what would your mother, my father, and the others have done to him? They would have killed him or captured him. He did what he had to. Hinata knew the truth of what had happened that day, but Naruto had told her never to tell anyone of it. Even if she had, she knew Kiba would not believe it and just think she was making excuses for Naruto. Hinata-chan, Kiba spoke, trying his best to sound like the easygoing boy who had been her teammate. There are more important things at stake than just your feelings. The future of Konoha is in the balance. You need to make a choice. If it's impossible for you to escape, then at least give me what information you have about Naruto and about his plans. Kiba-kun, please don't ask me to betray my husband. Naruto-kun has loved me and protected me, he has made me happier than I have ever been. In spite of the things I have to do for him. I love him more now than I ever have, certainly more than I ever loved my father or sister. More than you love Konoha and all your friends. More than me, Shino, and Kurenai. Yes, she answered with no hesitation. Much more. Don't ask me to choose Kiba-kun, because I already did, a long time ago. He looked at her with real sadness. You've changed, Hinata. She nodded. Yes, I have, and it's all thanks to Naruto-kun. Without him I would still be nothing but the shy quiet girl I was. I liked that girl, Kiba told her sadly. I never did, Hinata said. She was always unhappy and crying when she was alone. I like myself now, Kiba. Then I guess there's nothing for us to talk about, is there? If you want to talk to me as a friend about old times and about our lives, then we can. If all you want is to pour poison in my ear, then it's best for you to just go. Miserably he nodded and stopped walking with her. He stood there and watched her go. She didn't once hesitate or turn back. That's it for part 5. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.